In the video today, we're answering a viewer question because Amanda D asks us, I was just wondering what would happen if you attach money instead of a stamp to a letter and tried to mail it. Just before we get started, I do want to say that this video is brought to you by 1440. Do you want all of your news brought to you in a single email? Well, check out 1440 because they scour 100 and more sources so you don't have to. Culture, science, sports, politics, business, all in a 5-minute read, and is 100% free. There is a link below if you want to check it out now. More about them later. So as we've covered in our video on what happens to undeliverable mail with no return address, the individuals tasked with processing mail often go above and beyond what is expected of them in their quest to ensure that every piece of mail gets delivered to its intended destination. In the United States, it would appear that this admirable dedication to the job includes sifting through letters that have the correct postage attached to them with tape instead of using a stamp. Yep, as weird as it might sound, in the United States, it is in fact totally possible to send a letter by simply attaching money equal to the value of the required postage for a given letter, and it'll still probably be delivered. It's also fully possible to do a hybrid of this, where perhaps you needed 2 stamps for a given letter but only had 1, so affix 1 stamp and then some change to cover the rest. Unfortunately, the same does not appear to be the case in several other countries that we looked at, such as the UK, or at least we couldn't find any examples of people successfully being able to do this, nor there being any rules about whether it's allowed or not. In fact, in the UK, taping coins to an envelope, equivalent to normal postage for the letter itself, even if it was processed, could see whoever you were writing the letter to being charged extra, because any letter more than 5mm thick gets charged as a large letter under Royal Mail rules, and thus requires the sender to pay slightly more for the privilege of sending it. Moving back to Freedom Mail, to quote the Mailing Standards of the United States Postal Service Domestic Mail Manual Part 233, Mail Collection, it reads, generally, mailable matter is collected from a mailbox if postage is fully prepaid or money equal to the required postage is left in the mailbox. Money in a mailbox is left at the customer's risk. When postage or money is insufficient to cover postage, the mail is not collected, or if the sender cannot be identified, the mail is treated as unpaid mail. Mailable matter not bearing postage found in, placed on, attached to, supported by, or hanging from boxes is handled under the applicable standards. There are some potential caveats here, however. For starters, mail with the correct postage and change attached instead of a stamp usually needs to be sorted by hand, something that will obviously result in the letter being delayed somewhat. Also, it's noted that as much as mail workers endeavor to find and process these letters, sometimes, particularly if you dropped the letter off instead of mailed it from your own mailbox, they end up being processed by the automated sorting machine, which has a tendency to chew up letters with foreign objects attached to the outside of them, so do be wary of that as well. According to one-time Post Office Mail Facility Manager Fran Eagle, the usual process when dealing with letters with coins and the like attached is to remove the money and replace it with a stamp before simply feeding it back into the sorting machine to continue on its merry way like any other piece of mail. This can, however, potentially create a problem, as, with some caveats, it is a federal crime to knowingly open someone else's mail, something that can easily happen by accident when removing tape from a thin paper envelope. As such, some postal workers may be wary about trying to remove the change in some cases, even if it is the correct amount. In these cases, they may either send it back to you or to the Mail Recovery Center, more colloquially known as the Dead Letter Office. As we've discussed in our video about that subject, workers in the Mail Recovery Center are incredibly committed to their jobs, so there's a good chance that the letter will probably still get delivered, even if this does happen. Moving on, it turns out that the United States Postal Office has a number of obscure rules related to mail and postage that vary in accordance with geography. For example, if you live well outside of a major city and far away from any suburb or the like, your mail will in all likelihood be handled by a rural letter carrier. Due to the nature of their work, rural letter carriers are granted a host of perks not enjoyed by traditional mail carriers. These include the ability to wear their own chosen clothing and drive their own vehicle if they so wish. More relevant to the topic at hand, beyond the perks, they are also empowered to function as a sort of mobile post office. For example, if you'd like to buy stamps, just wait at your mailbox for the rural mail person to arrive, or leave appropriate funds in the mailbox with a note, and generally they'll be happy to sell you some postage. They are also able to process express mail and priority mail, or do what's needed to help you mail a package, even with insurance, or sell you a money order, process certified or registered mail, all essentially the same way that postal workers would do it if you actually went into the post office. As you might have guessed from all of this, if you simply leave the required money for postage for a piece of mail in your mailbox, perhaps in a separate envelope paperclipped to the envelope, or priority mail item that you wish to mail with instructions on what the money is for, they should happily process that for you, the same as if you'd gone to the post office to have it done yourself. And in this case, if you leave extra money for a book of stamps, they should leave that too. The idea here is that people that live out of the way from more populated regions often have to drive a long way to get to the post office, so they simply empower their rural carriers to do many of the tasks right there at your mailbox. Finally, at this point, you might be wondering how often people actually send mail with money instead of postage attached. It turns out that not very often relative to the number of letters processed daily. According to USPS, they process approximately 187 million pieces of first-class mail every day, of which only a couple of dozen items may have money instead of stamps attached. But hey, the reality is that today we mostly use email, and that brings me to today's sponsor, 1440, who I want to tell you a bit about before we get into the bonus facts today. So if you want to be that smartest person in the room, well, the 1440 Daily Digest is perfect for you. And given the number of emails I get about people saying that they tell the stories from our videos to their colleagues and friends, this could be right up your street. But hey, the reality is if you're anything like me, you get way too many emails on a regular basis and you don't want another email in your inbox. But what is great about the 1440 is that it basically provides an amazing news wrap-up, so you get all of your news and updates in a single email. 1440 scours over 100 news sources, ranging from culture and science to sports and politics, to create one digest email that you can read in 5 minutes or less, so you don't spend time browsing news sites. It's just 5 minutes in that email and you're done. It's also 100% free, so that's a plus. It's got everything you need to be aware of for the day, and most importantly, it simplifies your life. Sign up for 1440 through the link in the description below. Doing that also supports this channel, so that's a cool thing. And let's get into those bonus facts. Speaking of weird US government-related services that a lot of people don't know about, it turns out if you ever find yourself with a torn piece of money, say where maybe a third of the bill is missing, you can just mail it to the Department of Treasury with your info, and in most cases they will mail you back a check for the amount of the bill. That said, there are caveats, such as that you must send in greater than 50% of the bill, or if you don't have that much of it, you must provide sufficient evidence to show that the other part has been destroyed. And now for another bonus fact. Given that it's a federal crime in the US to open someone else's mail, with some shockingly severe consequences if you're caught, you might at this point be wondering if that one time you accidentally opened your neighbor's mail that was mistakenly left in your box means that you're now going to be facing a lengthy jail sentence if you're discovered. It turns out that, contrary to popular belief, no. There are exceptions in cases where it's reasonable to assume that you may have accidentally opened the piece of mail, such as if you found it in your own mailbox among many other letters, where you may open a series of letters without looking at who the given letter was actually addressed to. That said, if you then throw that letter away instead of putting it back in your mailbox with a note like return to sender or wrong address, well, now you did just commit a crime via intentionally obstructing the delivery of US mail. Another caveat to all of this is that if someone gives you permission to open their mail, even though you definitely, in these cases, know it's not addressed to you, you have not committed any crime in this case either, though, of course, if you want to be completely safe, perhaps it's best to get written permission if you don't trust that person. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up below, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, please do check out our great sponsor, 1440, linked to below. And as always, thank you for watching.